episode 228, and welcome to Daily Global Insights with Sri and Sri. Today is the 19th of August, Thursday, and in global news, we have deposed Afghan President Ashraf Ghani resurfaces in United Arab Emirates. The United States bars Afghans from accessing billions of reserves held in US bank accounts and blocks international IMF loans. NATO warns of military strikes if Taliban hosts international terrorists again. Videos and photos reveal Taliban violence across Afghanistan. Namaskar and welcome to PGurus, Sridharji.
Namaskar, good morning to everybody, or good evening to everybody in other parts of the world, and looking forward to an exciting day and a great session. I think you said the context very well. The Afghan saga continues. This is the most dominant topic, in the world today. The Mr. Ghani surfaces in United Arab Emirates. It seems like the discussions have also been started between Taliban and the prior president, Mr. Hamid Karzai. And EU and United States, or the global coalition, is making the way to is making the best attempts to find out what they can do. One of the first things that they've done is block $10 billion or $9.5 billion of their reserves, which is held in the United States. They've also worked with IMF to block any kind of credits and loans that is likely to be granted to Taliban. So, and then EU has very categorically and clearly warned that they cannot have used bases in Afghanistan. Both India, EU, and even many Republican senators have stood up and spoken about a potential threat looming as a result of these bases being used. So I think there's a warning that is very clearly being sent to Taliban.
Taliban's exiled leaders, led by co-founder and negotiator Mullah Abdul Ghani Baradar, returns to Afghanistan to form the government. Turkey to decide on Taliban recognition after government is formed, says Turkish foreign minister. So, what is usually Turkey is in the front of all these Islamic moves. Something I see here as a hesitation. I think Afghanistan is predominantly Sunni, and so is Turkey. So, what are the dynamics going on, sir?
The dynamics that are going on here are that Turkey wants to be a good member of the international community as it tries to assert and expand, its leadership as the one representing the broader Islamic base. So I think that's one of their first objectives. They are also trying to have a dialogue going with. They already have dialogue going with Israel. They have dialogue going with UAE. They are also trying to open a dialogue with Saudis. So all this indicates that Turkey wants to be, at least right now, being part of the international coalition. Whether it remains or not, time will tell. Remember, Turkey is not one of the four countries which have the High Commission or which have their embassy, depending on which nomenclature it is, operating in. China has its diplomatic presence. Iran has its diplomatic presence. Pakistan has its diplomatic presence, and Russia has a diplomatic presence. Turkey doesn't.
An EU state should take in people in immediate danger in Afghanistan. Afghans rescued to Germany describe terrifying scenes at the Kabul airport and the chaos. Dutch evacuation from Afghanistan begins after initial failed attempts, and the United Kingdom unveils a scheme to take in up to 20,000 Afghan refugees over the coming years. Emmanuel Macron of France demands robust EU plan against illegal immigration. You have the legal immigration of those people who are able to catch the flight outside of Kabul, but you also have this illegal immigration, which is just people trying to trickle in. Sridharji, is this another exodus like the Syrian problem that is being now created?
In other words, you're putting a context, which is this Arab Spring 2, except the Arab Spring 2 emanating from Afghanistan? It possibly, in one way, you can infer it looks that way, right? India has opened up its e-pass system to look at this emergency visa approval process. United States already has had 900 people come in that C-17 flight. Not all of them are Americans. There's a fair amount of refugees. Now you are seeing a broader concerted effort coming from Europe. ranging from Germany, Holland, United Kingdom, and maybe other parts of EU. But certainly the Eastern blocs have not, raised their hands. So, and all these people are likely to come in no kind of, in no categorized or organized manner, because outside of the, whether you want to call it Kabul or Bagram, or whether you want to call it as Hamid Karzai International Airport, the outside of the airport is controlled by Taliban. Inside of the airport is controlled and managed by the U.S. forces. So whosoever is getting in, there's no time for anybody to kind of validate those documents. They're just coming on board with whatever input or whatever documents that they can show. So the question, therefore, is what happens when they land? Well, you receive them and you put them, and then you're going to grant them amnesty and give in. So this looks like what you have mentioned, and in one single swoop, this disastrous lack of strategy-based Biden execution of exit. Look, all presidents are wrong, okay? Maybe Bush is wrong, maybe Obama is wrong, maybe Trump is wrong. But the challenge for Biden is he knew Afghanistan, having served 8 years as a vice president under Obama. That's number one. And number two, he says that, it was a fairly well thought out exit strategy. The person who executes the exit strategy in the end with this type of chaos becomes accountable for the outcomes and faces the criticism. And so this is what is going on. Why Biden gets blamed? Biden gets blamed basically because they, floundered on the exit strategy. And the consequences of that are we heard about the consequences of terrorism, the bases being used. The consequences of all these people coming in and potentially can create problem in the future.
And now China has started its drumbeat again. China holds assault drills near southern Taiwan. Do you think the United States will be responding very swiftly should China indulge in any misadventure on the Taiwan Strait, sir?
I would be a fool to guess based on what has happened in the past 72 hours, sir. So therefore, we have to see what happens as the events unfold. But the past 72 hours is any evidence, we have a major problem in that part of the world.
And Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Naftali, did I get that right? Naftali Bennett, I'm sorry. Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to visit White House in late August. And this must be a very critical meeting because I think he's coming here for the first time after becoming the president. How do you see this visit, sir?
I think that this meeting would have had two different sets of agendas. One pre-Afghan, now post-Afghan. That's and you have seen the lurking danger from the post-Afghan. So this may be a far more, I'm here to take your input. I'm here to support you, which is what they said even to responding to your earlier question. Both Biden and the members of the administration have stood by both Israel and have stood by Taiwan, right? Execution is the key. So coming back to respond to your question, which is namely Mr. Naftali Bennett, is going to be how can you help? How can we make sure that we are supportive, etc., etc. Remember, Polish rescinding of the reparations is also an item that is going to be discussed at the top because both Israel and US have taken a very strong stand that they will fight this Polish parliamentary resolution. So you got that agenda as well. In addition, you have Iran, you have Gaza, you have Iraq, you have Lebanon, and you have Palestine. The issues that are gripping Israel. So it would be interesting to see that how Biden administration looks at this with a very different set of lens in the context of what has happened.
And in United States news, the State Department says Taliban appears to let Americans reach Kabul airport. Pentagon says no plans to rescue Americans in Afghanistan who cannot get to the airport. Prisoners released by Taliban pose serious security to US, warn House Republicans. It should be all members of the House. I don't know why only House Republicans need to be concerned about this. Afghanistan blame game begins with Pentagon, White House, and Intel pointing fingers. Biden's pledge to restore American standing around the world in peril with the collapse of Afghanistan. I hear you loud and clear there, Sridharji. This whole thing, from the day one of the Biden administration, he has done all self-inflicted wounds. In other words, if he had done a Rip Van Winkle, I wonder if America would be better today than what it is now. Just my loud thinking, sir.
Um, I think we have three main challenges. We don't know who is running United States at any given
We have
point.
made some very educated guesses, but please go ahead.
No, I think that you are, we don't know who is running United States because you get different views. Okay, for example, I'll give you just yesterday. The Army and Pentagon is very clear. They are not in a rescue mission. They are basically in retrieving people who can reach the airport, basically. Okay. Then Mr. Biden says is exactly opposite, which is to say, no, we will not leave any American behind. We are going to make sure that every American is able to is brought home. Then there's a June 11th memo which says that there is no obligation on the part of the U.S. government, which was drafted just and amended, drafted just on the threshold of this withdrawal, which is basically it's not accountable for bringing back, and so therefore government cannot be held responsible and face litigation. Now, if you take that law, then effectively it means if you reach the airport, you make it. If you don't reach the airport, we can't make it. This is what the Pentagon is saying, right? We are not responsible. And now I just explained in the first section that the outside of the airport is controlled by Taliban. Some people say there's 15 checkpoints. Some people say there's 20 checkpoints. So they all have to make their way through these checkpoints to get inside the airport. Only when they get inside the airport and onto the airfield, then you have the U.S. Army. U.S. Army is guarding the plane, guarding the airport inside, and allowing people, with some kind of checks to get in. So here's the contradiction between what Mr. Biden says and what the Pentagon says. And remember, they're not in combat. They just have gone on a rescue mission, right? Rescue meaning bring people back. Okay, repatriation or what the appropriate word that one can use. So this is an example of the contradictions. So this is what, this is how I probably would like to respond. And again, you go back and play the video of Mr. Biden few days, 3-4 days ago, and now you play back what exactly has happened. You can see again the stark differences. So Mr. Biden has got a real problem in terms of his own personal credibility as a president on a wide-ranging set of issues that confronts people. And that make up his policies, whether he's influenced by progressive on one side, whether he's influenced by middle course Democrats on the other side, or whether he is influenced by those who are on the right of the middle Democrats. We don't know. But certainly right now, the progressives are holding sway, and that seems to be shaping the policy and the inconsistencies that are flowing through.
The Biden administration unveiled a proposal Wednesday to speed up decisions on asylum claims by giving the Department of Homeland Security officers the power to grant asylum to those at the border, including illegal immigrants. Yes, you heard that right. Without having to go through an immigration court. The new proposed rules would also give Homeland Security the power to catch and release people who ask for asylum when detention is unavailable or impracticable. All these apply to the Texas border. I'm sure it applies to New Mexico as well as to Arizona and California. California also has the same thing. For some reason, because we are having a recall election in a couple of weeks' time, people are not talking about this much. But I can tell you, when the cat is out, the mice are playing. So your thoughts?
No, my thoughts are, it's an astonishing decision. Department of Homeland Security has been the root cause of the problem. There's a whole range of issues that we have covered extensively in Daily Global Insights. Now, the latest makes it even more laughable, where the courts have been taken out of the intervention, And so Department of Homeland Security officials can make a decision and say, okay, I see, you are allowed, get in. Okay, you are allowed, get in. Okay, you are allowed, get in. And you can, we're going to give you the asylum based on whatever they say. So how is this going to be validated and vetted? There's no process. So it's an astonishing decision, but there is nothing surprising relative to the question that you raised last time. Okay? So therefore, I said, as I mentioned, we're going to have bags of lollies and bags of stuff also handed over to all these people. And we already covered that, I think, 2 sessions ago. They're going to be given funding for legal. They're also going to be given funding for cultural orientation and integration. Okay, money going to be given to these people. Okay, it's. I mean, how do you rationally explain this? It's unbelievable.
And House GOP demands answers over the $87 billion spending in I should say improper spending on entitlements. Pelosi and her top Democrats will not budge in the battle with moderates on the infrastructure bill battle. Say they have Biden's support, and I don't know how good that means in terms of reality, because today, if there is an opinion poll taken, Mr. Biden is going to find himself in a lot of trouble. Your thoughts, sir?
My thoughts are that this fraud is always a fraud happens when you have this gigantic pool of money gets allocated and distributed, and there is no way by this huge volumes of money get that easily distributed, without incidences of fraud. Now, this has been going on since 2019. So this is the expansion of Medicare and Medicaid program that has happened. In 2019, they have had, I'm told that the committee, both on you remember that the House has been under the control of the Democrats. So therefore, this is coming from the House committee. The House committee has raised the question, which is namely to say, give us the documentation. 2019, the fraud was 20 billion or 19 billion. And 2020, the fraud was around 67 billion, making it up 87 billion. This is on incorrect payments made to Medicare and Medicaid participants. What is the extent of payments? 1 in 5. 20% of the payments that's been given under the Medicare Medicaid program is fraudulent. That is according to the findings of the House committee. So how are they going to rectify? We don't know. As far as the battle is concerned, Nancy Pelosi is very clear. She wants to have this green accord and climate accord and probably even amnesty for all these illegal aliens tucked into and normalized as part of the $3.5 trillion budget that they are seeking. Remember, there's a difference between a stimulus and a budget. A budget, once certain payments are approved under the budget, it has to be enacted as a law, and it has to be normalized as a recurring expense under the budgets. That's the significance of this issue. So they want to normalize all types of payments that were granted under this austerity stimulus program into normalization. Minimum income, child care payments, tax offsets, direct payments, unemployment insurance, all this to be, and then expansion of Medicare, Medicaid, etc., all to be normalized as a recurring expense within the budget. This could take few months because this all has to be, passed as a law within, and then a bill. You construct a bill, passed as a law. There'll be lots of negotiations. So this infrastructure, which they called it as imminent and almost important, is going to be stuck until such time this gets done.
The mask and vaccine mandate debate goes on, and Arizona blocks funding for schools mandating masks. On the contrary, the neighboring state, New Mexico, is mandating masks to all above the age of 2, irrespective of vaccination status at public places. Biden has threatened to sue states that fight the vaccine mandate. So this vaccine stuff, the mask, is going according to who is in power in what state, it appears, sir. Your thoughts?
Well, I don't know how scientifically or logically I can give explanation to some of these things, because every day the data changes, which is to say, if you give masks to children, it affects them mentally, it creates problems. Then you have the CDC mandate say everybody needs to be mandated. Then is it everybody needs to be mandated, which is what age is the cutoff? So you have this dispute that is going on. Rather than giving an answer, what is right, what is wrong, what is now going on is the federal and state structure is being broken here. So the states also have governors who administer the state. So they are accountable for their decisions and actions and the outcomes that come with it. But for Biden to mandate something, sitting in the center and say, I said so, you do this, is not going to augur well in a very democratic setup.
Texas Supreme Court rules Democrats absent from the state capital can be arrested. So now the government of Texas has an endorsement from the court that they can go ahead and arrest those people who have run away from there. That's how I see it. You could see it differently. They are right now holed up in Washington, D.C. Some of them became COVID positive and then they had to be quarantined. Suddenly this thing has completely been buried under the carpet. Nobody knows where they are, what they are doing. I don't have no idea. Have they started trickling back into Texas, sir?
Not yet. Otherwise, they'll be arrested. Not yet. Very soon, they will trickle back in. And they trickle back in, I think that the drama will start again.
So we have some incredible stuff going on here, and I can assure you, viewers, some of this drama is going to find its way back into India, and you will start seeing similar things happening there too. India news. Indian intelligence assessment has found that Pakistani terror groups are now in Kabul. India evacuates 150 Indo-Tibetan border patrol force and sniffer dogs from Kabul, and Indian evacuation is supported by the United States and Tajik, and long drives crossing Taliban checkpoints. India presiding over the United Nations Security Council session on Afghanistan makes 3 specific points. I'll let Sridharji explain these. Sridharji, there are some videos now doing the rounds on social media where you can hear Punjabi being spoken on the streets of Kabul. And the only way that would be possible is that there are elements of the Pakistani army, because Pakistani army is made up of Pashtun and Punjabis for the most part. And clearly that means that these guys are in bed with Taliban.
Well, look, I think this has been, we have reported in Daily Global Insights based on all the data that we have seen and based on our research, that it was stated that there's close to 20,000 mercenaries who make up various constituents from various different states or countries, are part of the 60, 70,000 plus the Taliban army or Taliban forces. So therefore, they could be, they could be from anywhere. The imprint of Pakistan has to be there because of their long-standing association between Taliban and Pakistan. And many of these people probably have even had taken shelter in Pakistan. So therefore, I think it's just a re-endorsement, and people are extremely concerned. And I think India is highlighting that. So India made 3 specific observations. One is UNSC in the current format will not work. What it's trying to say is, if Afghanistan is a problem for India, which is going to be, it is a problem for India in conjunction with Pakistan as to who is there, how is it that India is not a member, influential member in the United Nations Security Council? You have all other members who may not be directly affected. So they're talking about the first point subtly, the composition of the United Nations Security Council. It's not the only issue. Even China could be the other issue that India is alluding to. I think the second they're saying is that the Taliban has been propped up by Pakistan. So we get to make sure that they are not going to use the various bases to launch attacks into India, which would be a concern. This is the third point that they were trying to make. The second point is that the concern that India is expressing basically because of the confluence of China and Pakistan sitting and assisting Taliban. So these are the 3 essential points. 1, membership. 2, is the regional influence and impact where India is directly affected. 3rd, whether those bases could be used, because again, India was a victim of an airport hijack that occurred, plus, of course, a couple of other incidents, especially from Kandahar. And Kandahar is the base of the Taliban.
Indian economy rapidly normalizing to pre-pandemic levels, says Mr. Kumaramangalam Birla. Economy gaining traction with rapid pickup in manufacturing activity. India's export of surplus COVID-19 testing kits projected to touch 620 million by September of 2021. Inflation likely to stabilize for the rest of the year as per an RBI August bulletin, waiting for cabinet approval on bill on cryptocurrency, according to the finance minister. Sridharji, some good news, some still, India is still kind of thinking about crypto. I don't know how well they understand what cryptocurrency means. Anyway, that's just my concern. Your thoughts, sir?
My thoughts are, I think, first on the economic front, I think they seem to be, making their way, both on the manufacturing as well as the exports, which we have covered quite extensively. The inflation seems to be in control. This is also the belief of the RBI based on the numbers that they've seen. Um, so I think on the economic front, they seem to be on its way. I think this test kits that they're talking about, I think, we got to make sure that the number is correct. But the story is it's a humongous number that they probably a lot of it was either imported, developed locally, mostly developed locally as a result of the need that arose in the early days of the Delta variant. So I think that's a good news that they are augmenting and using that as an export vehicle or to generate export revenues. With regard to crypto, I think India is aware of crypto. The RBI has, the central bank has looked at it. They now recognize that the world is moving and India cannot be left behind because now there are cryptos that support the sovereign currencies. So I think, as you said, I am sure they will be able to. They won't be able to leverage the resources. Remember, they've got two very strong technical people in the ministry in the cabinet of Mr. Modi, who are extremely capable. One of them is was responsible for the early origin of the chips in Intel. So therefore, he comes with a great pedigree. And so I think they will leverage all of the resources, plus, of course, the IT capabilities that India has.
The individual you mentioned has an amazing folk tongue, sir. In his regional language, he is bashing BJP, but his English channels are always pro BJP. That's just my observation. A 3-kilometer area surrounding naval installations, no-fly zone, wants Navy and stern action for violation. So we can see that India is starting to react to also the fact that there is an artificial island coming up just outside of Colombo, which is going to be controlled completely by China. In fact, they have come up with the same East India Company model. They are having a private company run that island. So I think these are all not good signs because India is trying to see how best it can shore up the security around the naval bases. But it also has problems in 3 states now, in addition to Kashmir. Kashmir seems to be a little bit stable. West Bengal, Tamil Nadu, and Kerala. So that's where we have not looked at some of the other problems because there are so many other programs that we host where we talk about all these things in more detail. Let's move on to markets. Unless, Sridharji, you want to add something to the naval site fortification?
I think drones are a big threat to India, and I think they are trying to address that. And they're ahead of the game, which is pretty good.
Very good, very good. And in market sell-off over they were over jitters in the potential shift in monetary policy and a consequent stimulus impact. There is also looming inflation and consumer sentiments in the back of investor minds. And now we can share the market data. Sridharji, take it away.
Yeah, just to set the context, yesterday basically the treasurer spoke. The Fed chairman spoke. The Fed chairman gave an indication that they're going to taper the programs in the positive signs of economic recovery. So that immediately sent the jitters, which is namely to say what's going to happen to the monetary policy. So you saw Dow Jones drop 380 points. They had dropped close to 250 or 230 points the day prior. S&P dropped 47. So that's what you saw in the index. The good news on the oil side is that you saw both Brent and the crude. Now crude is below 65, Brent is around 67, well below the $70 mark, which augurs well. But still, it'll take few days for the prices to flow through into the petrol pumps or the gas stations. Then, as far as the yield bond markets are concerned, US is in a pretty good spot with a 10-year bond at 1.27 and the Bund and Japanese 10-year at Japanese yen, still maintaining stable rates. Again, the Bitcoin and Ethereum fell, and they are driven purely by what volatility and demand and supply. They went up by about $2,000 a couple of days ago, no, a few $1,000 couple of days, 2-3 days ago, and they have fallen close to about $2,500, at least on the Bitcoin side. That's just a reflection of the volatility. The main headline news is the central bank, the Fed here, feels that the economy is back on momentum and they're going to taper the asset purchase program. And there is a fear in the mind of the investors. Okay, the honeymoon is over, market is tightening.
And with that, we bring to a close today's daily Global Insights program. We'll be back again tomorrow, possibly, may or may not happen tomorrow. We will let you know. There may be a weekend digest of what is happening because there's so much news happening on a 24-hour cycles that we might want to just wait and see how it plays out. So we will keep you posted. For sure, we'll be back next Monday. Thanks for joining. Namaskar, and see you again very soon.
Namaskar. Thank you. Have a good evening. It was good to be in the session, and have a wonderful evening or have a wonderful day, depending on where you are.